Everybody. My name is Ayana Newborn. I am the program administrator for graduate yoga studies, and we are here really celebrating what open house for graduate admissions at LMU. And I'm so thankful for our alum and current students for joining us today. And we will get started. Dr. Chappell is traveling, so he's going to join us a little bit later. Faculty, they're going to join us in the second hour. So the first hour is really dedicated towards our alum sharing their experience in the program. So you kind of get a sense of what led them here, as well as what sustained them in the program, what they learned, and how they're utilizing that in their everyday life. Okay. Just a quick reminder, after this forum, they have a couple of other info sessions that they want you to be aware of. There is the financial aid at 6, the info session for international admissions at 6 as well. And then career and professional development will be meeting at 6:30. So just keep those in mind if you're thinking you want to join those other meetings right after us. Okay. So let's get started. And Susan, I would love for you to share first. Tell us, what cohort are you from? What led you to the program? And then we'll kind of go over some more questions from there.
Okay. Just so everyone knows, after I talk, I may have to depart because I have to teach a class. So that's why I asked if I could speak first to all of you. So please don't think I'm rude if you see me drop off the meeting. I'm Susan Chapman. I was in cohort 5, and it's been so long. It's not been that long, but it feels like a lifetime ago because so much with all of us has happened in yoga. And what was your second question, Ayana?
Yes, so lots of time has passed. But no, what led you to the program? And then based on, what you remember learning in the program, how are you utilizing that in your world today?
Yes, so I came to the program because I had always heard of LMU's certificate programs. So first I had heard of the certificate programs predated the master's program. So I started taking certifications in yoga philosophy, and then I met students who were in the master's program, and that sounded so intriguing to me. And I had already had one master's degree, so I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't, but I was just so drawn to it that I thought, I don't care, I'm going to do a second master's degree. And so then I went to one of the graduate colloquia, and I saw all the things that people had studied throughout their time in the master's program, and I was absolutely hooked, and I absolutely had to get into the program. And so that's what led me to it. And then post graduation, well, a lot of things happened. So post graduation, I had worked for Chopra Global. At the time, it was the Chopra Center for Wellbeing for a lot of years. So I stayed with Chopra Global and wrote some of their courses, which I had been doing through the masters. And I was a lead faculty member for them for many years until they ceased operations about 2 years ago. And so now I instruct and mentor aspiring yoga therapists through this program, through yoga studies. And I also teach at my local community college. So I provide yoga instruction for yoga in yoga for older adults in a therapeutic way because I am a yoga therapist. I became CIAYT when I finished the program. I also teach mindfulness classes at my local community college, and I also teach for a local hospital. I teach therapeutic yoga there, and then I see my own clients. And I'm just like a course or two away from starting my dissertation in a doctoral program. So I'm doing that as well. And then I recently wrote a book, and that's coming out in April. And I have some online courses that I'm going to launch from there. So I've been busy, but I've been busy all based on what we've done through the graduate program and how inspired I was from all of the things that I learned. Um, and like my experience with my cohort was just amazing, and that's why I'm so excited to see Joe, because Joe was in my cohort, or I was in Joe's cohort, and we had some amazing experiences. We were so bonded, and we traveled together. We went to India and had wonderful experiences there. Some just mind-blowing experiences in India that were just so wonderful, and in the program itself, and where I came, what transformed for me in the program, especially, was that I had never really known about yoga therapy. And all of a sudden, I was taking a course in it, and I was just like blown away by that as well. And so yoga therapy became a passion for me, which is how I mainly teach now. And so that's when I went through that part of the program and became a CIAYT yoga therapist. And I would say the most memorable lesson that I took away from the whole program is that yoga, it's 5,000 years old, if not more. And it's a lifelong study, also, if not more. And I should really be patient with myself as I journey through this. So there's just so much to learn and so much to integrate, and it's embodied as well as philosophical and intellectual. So I'm just incredibly grateful to the program and really, really glad that I did it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
Um, I definitely resonate with that sentiment that this lifelong learning, it expands beyond just the few years that you're in the program, right? And it extends into what we're doing now, and we are very proud of what you're doing in the community, and how you keep coming back and supporting us and supporting the students. And so we really appreciate that for sure.
Well, thank you,
Um,
Ayan. I'm happy to do it.
yeah, of course, of course. Joe, since you and Susan were the same cohort, I would love for you to share about your experience, what led you to the program, your unique
Hmm.
experience post program, and then a little
Mhm.
bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Ayana. And yeah, so great to see Susan. Brings back all these great memories from our 2 years together in the program. And like she said, one of the biggest things is the bonds you make with the people in the program. And you're there with each other, here in LA, going through the coursework, all of that, helping each other out with Sanskrit and balancing all the reading and all of that. But then you take this amazing trip to India together. And that's if that's not a bonding experience, I don't know what is. And yeah, if you've never been to India, you know that's going to take you out of your comfort zone, and you better have some friends around, to go through that with. So anyway, a lot of great memories sort of flooding back right now. And in terms of my own journey of coming to the program, so I came to it really sort of from an immersion in yoga practice from my early 20s. So I started with the Shivananda Yoga Ashram, and I really just immersed myself in really, pretty traditional yoga practice and all different types of yoga, asana, but also bhakti chanting, the philosophy, Vedanta, Ayurveda, the whole sort of yogic lifestyle. And they talk about in that tradition, they talk about the different types of students that come to yoga. And one of them is called, the gunpowder student. And the idea is that as soon as they hear the teachings, they're like, I'm all in, let's let's go. Like, I want to go from here all the way, to enlightenment as soon as possible. And and that was definitely me. And I just wanted to give my whole life, to the practice of yoga and more broadly, authentic spirituality. And so I became a teacher in that tradition. I taught at the LA Shivananda Yoga Center here. And that's how actually I got in contact with Chris, because Chris has a connection with Swami Omkarananda, who was running that center. And he first made me aware of the program when I was teaching at the LA Center, but I was still finishing my undergrad at the time. And what ended up happening is that I had a lot of deep experience in the Shivananda tradition. I then had a lot of deep experience in the Buddhist tradition as well, in Zen, in Tibetan Buddhism. So I was exposed to all these traditional paths. And one of the things that I was really looking for was sort of almost like a bird's eye view of the whole tradition and sort of almost like an objective perspective on it. Because when you study in any one tradition, they're giving you their perspective on yoga, what yoga means to them, or what spirituality means to them, or what Buddhism means to them, which is super great. And they're based in lineage. So there's something really beautiful to that. But what I talked about with Chris, and that really got me interested in the program, was taking this sort of more objective academic perspective, looking at the whole tradition, seeing how it all sort of fits together and also comparing traditions, because I'd studied different traditions and I wanted to get a sense of what are the difference between these traditions? What are they saying? What are the philosophical differences? What are the historical differences? And as part of this, I was really starting to think, okay, if I'm really into all of this and I want to have a career in this field, then maybe, going the PhD route and getting a PhD, becoming a professor in religious studies, maybe that's a way to go because I could continue my research, my understanding, and so forth, um, but totally connected to these spiritual topics. And so one of my other motivations in coming to the program was to really explore that option because you really don't know what academia, higher academia is like until you're in it. And so all of that was really accomplished in the program. When I came in, I really got a sense of what academia is like at that level. I was able to talk to people about PhD programs and get a real sense of what that path would look like and talk to the professors about their journey to a PhD, and really weigh those options. Another thing I was looking at was possibly becoming a translator in the Tibetan tradition. And so I was studying Sanskrit and Tibetan while I was in the yoga program, and I got to really get a taste of, okay, is that really something that's going to be work for me long term? And what ended up happening through all of that is I got this sort of panoramic picture. And then ultimately, I'm in Nepal the year after the program. And this even was coming up a little bit the first year in India. And I'm doing a continuing education for Tibetan. And I'm really taking seriously, maybe I will go this translator route. And it was in Nepal that I realized, it's not the translator route. It's not the professor route right now. It's not the PhD route. It was back to me in my early 20s, the gunpowder student. I just wanted to go into full practice. And I had this idea that I could go into retreat, take everything that I learned, integrate it, and really, really walk the path of yoga that I had been studying in the program. So, long story short, in 2020, I finally had this incredible opportunity at the Center for Contemplative Research in Crestone, Colorado, to enter an open-ended meditation retreat in the Buddhist yoga tradition. And that's what I did. So from 2020 to 2024, I ended up doing a 4-year meditation retreat there in collaboration with a team of scientists studying the effects of long-term meditation, because there's been a lot of studies on, what happens if you meditate 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night, and those studies are super valuable, but there've never been a longitudinal study on what if you really, what if you meditate 8 hours a day, for several years, how's that going to change the brain? How's that going to change, your whole experience of reality? So anyway, that was, needless to say, an incredibly transformative experience. And it was a project endorsed by the Dalai Lama, as sort of this continuing dialogue between really Eastern spirituality and Western science. So I was super grateful to be a part of that. I got back from that this past summer. And now that I'm back in LA, I'm currently running the programs at the Hill Street Center for Yoga and Meditation in Santa Monica. So that's a program under Professor Chris Chappell. And so I'm teaching Buddhism classes here now. I'll also be teaching some yoga philosophy. And we're really trying to revitalize this center to make it really a hub in the community for exploring these topics and going deeper in our practice and all of that. So it feels like a perfect way to be coming out of a deep period of solitude and then really plugging into the community and serving, which is what this is all about at the end of the day. Taking this knowledge, taking the things we've developed in our own heart and mind, and then bringing it back and serving others.
Awesome. 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 Thank you so much, Joe, for sharing that.
Yeah.
When we met and when I heard your story, I was just so blown away, right? Like, it's one thing to intellectually kind of learn what's happening, right? Like, you're reading the
Mm.
text, you're kind of going into it, but to actually embody that study, that's something that's completely different. And one thing that, this program does well is, we champion the scholar practitioner, right? The
Yeah.
person who is deep in scholarship, deep in study, but also in practice,
Yeah.
because there's something about embodying what you're learning. Number one, in order to integrate that into your cellular system, but then also
Mhm.
to disseminate that to others. So
Yeah.
thank you so
Totally.
much for
And
sharing.
and I just want to say, Anna, that was actually a big reason that I chose the program was that I knew Professor Chappell was a scholar practitioner. And I already was clued in at that time that there are programs where it's like practice, like no way, you know. So that was super important to me that that piece was there, and that was, and we would do retreats in the program, and always bringing the scholarly work back to the actual practice. So
Right.
totally,
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you
yeah,
so
of
much for
course.
that.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, we have Alethea, who just recently graduated, but did a beautiful, beautiful presentation within the scope of yoga therapy. And so I would love for her to talk about what led her to the program, maybe talk a little bit about your research and what you're doing with that now, and some of the experience that you had, you know, presenting at conferences and such, through the program.
Perfect. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So, hello, I'm Alethea, and a little different. I don't know what cohort I'm in, but I just graduated in 2024, whatever number
Cohort
that is.
9. Cohort 9.
There we go. 9. And unlike Susan and Joseph, I don't live in LA, and I did the program online. I live in Mexico City. It took me 3 years. And the first time I looked into the program, I was in India. It was 2013, so it was the first cohort. And I thought, I can't afford to live in LA. So hopefully, you know, either you're already living there, or this the online option is something that actually really opened up that possibility for me at that later. Of course, I waited like 10 years, but so I was first called to it when I was practicing Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga in Mysore, and I was like, I have to go to this school. It's a Catholic school with a yoga studies master's degree. This is me, you know, as a Mexican woman. I was like, this is for me. And it took a while to actually come to fruition. And I was called, like Susan, like into this yoga therapy, which I kind of heard of because in the Ashtanga Vinyasa system, we call it yoga chikitsa. So there was this kind of idea that yoga could be personalized, but I had no idea what that actually could look like. And then I had no idea that you could bridge it with science, which is really what tickled my feather. So I did a couple, well, you have to, in the yoga therapy track, you do some projects, and that really helped me open my mind to the possibilities of how I could help my community, the world, etc. I did my thesis as a randomized controlled trial in a very short amount of time, about 2-minute breathing and how that affected perceived stress. Not like I couldn't, being so far away and a lot of things, I couldn't actually do like a clinical trial, but using the perceived stress scale, I was able to show, or I was able to find out some inklings that just even 2 minutes a day for 40 days can really make a difference in somebody's life when it comes to how they perceive the stress in their life and how they can become stress resilient. And I found that to be like, wow, now this opens up yoga for a lot more people, because I don't know about all of you, but I have clients and students and myself where sometimes 30 minutes or an hour is just too much to ask. And so to be able to find that 2 minutes can somehow make a difference in the, even if it's a teeny bit, really helps me see my, or give my students tools, or give my clients tools that could really help change how they view their life. And I also, while I was in the program, got to go to the yoga research conference in Kripalu and presented a case study poster on how yoga therapy, like 8-week yoga therapy sessions, like 8-week program for one client, was able to really impact her blood pressure, so her cardiac health, basically, after overcoming some childhood trauma, sexual abuse, all those things. And I still use that today. So I teach intimate partner violence survivors. I teach here in Mexico City. I teach active older adults. I teach at the Senior Citizens Center. I teach at a university here in Mexico, yoga. I working on some more different kinds of research. I have one of those Muse. I don't know if you guys have, it's like a consumer EEG. And so my brain is like going wild on all kinds of things to show how yoga can really affect our well-being, and not just in a prescriptive manner, which was something that I'm happy that Dr. Fazio really kind of drove home in the yoga therapy track, this salutogenic approach. And Susan too. Susan Chapman is actually my mentor. I'm going to be, hopefully this year, CI AYT yoga therapist, and so she's my mentor. But this idea of seeing the person as a whole, and not just being like yoga for arthritis, yoga for this. It's yoga for you, and so that is something also that I'm so grateful that the master's degree, the master's program gave me, is this wider concept of what not only yoga is, but what yoga can provide. And I think that that's something that's so beautiful. And on a personal note, it really brought me back to my sadhana in a way that's so much more healthy than when I was in my 20s. So yeah, that's all I have to share, I think, Ayana.
Thank you. That was great. That was awesome. That was definitely sharing a lot. Being at Loyola Marymount University with the resources that we have allows students to explore the idea of research, right? Like, how are we integrating this thing of yoga into the world in a practical sense? So yes, in a spiritual space, but also practically for like the everyday person. How are they going to interact with this yoga that we are, cultivating within ourselves and then disseminating? So thank you so much for all of that and all of your work. Last but not least, Emily. Emily is a current student. She was a graduate assistant for us for about a year and a half, 2 years, and is currently working on her thesis and getting ready for graduation. And so Emily, please take the floor. Please share about your experience.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming. I was really drawn to this program initially. Well, one, I just kind of stumbled upon it on the internet. I don't know what happened. The algorithm was like, you should see this. And I was like, okay, maybe I should see this. I was lucky enough when I was younger that yoga was actually offered as a PE class in my high school. So I was introduced to it as a teenager, and found it just very helpful to dealing with all of my teenage insecurity in my own body. And then kind of had just like a tangential, pretty surface level relationship to it. And then during the pandemic, I had always kind of toyed around with getting like a certification, maybe learning how to teach because I still practiced. And so I kind of jumped the gun and did a 300-hour teacher training instead of a 200-hour. I just applied and was like, hey, I have some experience. And they were like, cool, yeah, join us. And that was actually with Susanna Barkataki, for any of you who know her, and her Embrace Yoga's roots. It was really important to me when I was researching teacher training programs to have one that was like culturally appreciative, and not misappropriating the practice. So I learned so much, even though, yeah, like from that online space. And from that, my takeaway was, wow, there's so much more that I need to know. Like, I don't feel like I could teach after this. Like, I want to know more. At the time I was working, I spent 4 years in AmeriCorps, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it's like the domestic Peace Corps, so Peace Corps, but in the US. working in education primarily. And so after doing 3 of the 4 years here in LA, I was like, okay, it's time to move on to something else. Stumbled upon the program. My educational background is in psychology and philosophy, and I was like, you know what? We're just gonna do it. I've always known I wanted to go back to school at some point. This program seems super cool. It's kind of wild in that it pulls together all these different things, and I like really broad programs because I don't like closing off options. And applied and got in and have really, really enjoyed it. There isn't a class that I've taken that I've been like, oh, wish I didn't have to take that one. And I'll say I'm on the philosophy side of things. There definitely is quite the range among my cohort and the previous cohorts and the younger cohorts that I've known. I've had the opportunity to be really, really involved from being a GA and from being local. So highly recommend if you join the program, one, like go to all the additional things you can. There are a lot of free options. I, again, was in AmeriCorps for 4 years. I have no money. I have so much debt from this program, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I really enjoyed it, and I'm just going to stay in school forever so I never have to pay back my loans. So that's where I'm at. Sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained today, but getting involved, there's so many opportunities, not only with the program, and again, some of them are free, but also with the university. Like I've been really active in like the grad students of LMU, been able to present research posters with them, just get involved, go to happy hours, help try to plan things and plant some seeds for unionizing the grad students, things like that. It's been really, really a great time. There also is quite the range, that's what I was going to say, among these cohorts of people on the scholar to practitioner kind of spectrum. And so no matter where you are in that spectrum, there's going to be a place for you. Myself personally, I lean pretty hard into the scholar side compared to most of my cohort mates. I do have a practice and I do engage with yoga in that way, but like I said, I've never been a teacher in the way that I thought I was going to, and I just tend to be very cerebral. So I loved my 3 semesters of Sanskrit. My little gremlin brain just loved all the grammar. Health science was fascinating, even though I'm not on the yoga therapy track. I love learning about Buddhism, Jainism, just everything the program had to offer. Currently, I am working on my thesis. So, it's actually been great. It would be more great if I didn't have to work full time and could just focus on it. But alas, that's not the world we live in. And just to give you a taste, because I think my lens is just very, very different from what you've heard so far. My thesis title, I just had to submit it yesterday, so I have my official title, is The Alt-Right Hand Path, a Biopolitical Analysis of Yoga and Fascism. So you can do anything you want in this program. And I will be applying to doctoral programs in the fall. So I kind of I'm taking a year off to work on my applications. But yeah, there's so much, as you've heard, so many different ways you can take it that doesn't have to be this very cerebral pathway. But I'm always happy to talk about yoga and power and politics and any of that stuff. So reach out if that's your jam.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Yes, let's get into it. Let's talk about it. One of the classes that I think is very near and dear to my heart was Modern Yoga, Mindfulness, Social Change with Dr. Judith Carlisle. That starting off as a certificate and then us integrating, an option deeper into the study, right? Like this exploration of, how does yoga position itself in this in the world? How is this practice used and in relation to social change? Is it inherent, or is it something that we kind of develop? So yes, thank you so much for that reminder, Emily. The other piece that I would kind of hearken on what you mentioned was all of our free events, right? Like we do a scholarly series, whether it was Wednesday night lectures or lunch and learns, kind of midday to help to give timing for other people on the East Coast to be able to join. But we have scholars come once a month throughout the academic year to have interesting discussions about their scholarship, and then, you know, lots of times you find little tidbits that really relate to you. Like one of our scholars that came, a husband and wife team that wrote, it's the yoga of power. Yes.
The Yoga of Power,
The
yeah.
yoga of
Not to
power,
be
which,
confused with Julia Savola's The Yoga of Power.
right. Which was a very intriguing, enlightening discussion, and really kind of examining different texts that you wouldn't normally, and how they kind of relate yoga and power together. So definitely always having really interesting conversations. So I will pause us talking and allow you, our attendees, to number one, ask questions if anything is burning inside of you. But if there aren't any questions for our alum and for Emily, our current student, then I invite you to kind of come off mute and then, number one, give your name, where you're located in the world right now, and then what kind of led you to even be interested in LMU yoga studies. So first questions, and then we'll go into introductions.
I'll introduce myself, Kate Jackson.
Yeah.
I live in Los Angeles. I just had an ankle surgery, so I'm actually injured. And part of this injury was from doing a very, excuse the term, but bastardized form of yoga. And I have learned from my bad ways. But I've basically not been able to stand for about 8 weeks. And in this time, I've been looking for a period of time off from work. I do work full time, just to like recenter and figure out what I want to do next in my life and career. And in this period of stillness, I already had a meditation practice, but in this period of stillness and taking time away from work, my interests and curiosity led me to the Gita, and reading there led me to explore more and think more about my yoga practice and how I was going about it all wrong. And that led me to learn more about this program. And so I'm happy to be here today, but I'm curious, and I joined a little bit late, so I'm sorry for that, but I am curious, Emily, thank you for sharing your experience about sort of the scholarly angle for someone who might be interested in along that spectrum of scholarship and practitioner, more toward the practitioner side. What does that look like for someone who's interested in that route?
Totally. Well, I will say, like from the beginning, the first class you take is a foundational class that takes place prior to the start of the first semester. And even there, you're going on field trips, you're visiting, like LA has so much of the modern yoga history. Like Joe was saying, like working for Shivananda, like we go to different temples and meditation sites. Any class you have with Dr. Chappell, you're going to be meditating in. Any class you have with Dr. Fazio, you're going to be moving. Even Zoe, Dr. Sladoff, who teaches like Sanskrit, she's been doing Ashtanga, Mysore style yoga for decades. And so like everyone who teaches also practices, and they all have a variety of different lineages and lenses through which they practice. And I've really enjoyed that, being able to build those relationships and ask the personal questions about folks' practices. Um, And with those events, I was saying, like, yes, there's lecture events, and there's also like there's a free meditation retreat coming up. We gather at Benedict Canyon at Inside LA on a semi-monthly basis, and we'll practice together. Sometimes you have the opportunity to lead if you're interested in that. We'll go out in nature. We'll help pull up the invasive grasses in the canyon, which is very needed, especially in light of our current climate issues. So I think don't be intimidated by the scholarship if that's something you're concerned about. Nobody here is trying to fail you from your classes. Everyone wants to encourage you, and it is a program that's very choose your own adventure. So for someone like me, I make it harder on myself than I probably need to, just because of how I have been trained and how I like to write. Um, but everyone's going to work with you, and you'll be able to explore those topics that are more important to you. And even if you do the philosophy track, it doesn't have to be like hardcore, like Foucauldian political philosophy like I'm doing. There's someone in my thesis class who's doing like a comparative paper on Judaism and yoga, and like how yoga can be kosher. Like, so I would say, I'm not entirely sure what angle you're coming from as a practitioner, but there's many opportunities to practice. And also, like, the scholarship is not going to, like, it's vigorous, but it's not going to, like, take away from your practice or detract. And it's not, I guess, like I said, nobody's going to be trying to fail you. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I can add a little bit, and then I would love to hear Joe's perspective. For me, I saw an ad, for teacher training at LMU, which is what led me to this program. And I remember meeting Dr. Chappell and hearing about the history and philosophy and thinking, oh wow, that's really interesting. And then they said, oh, there's a master's, and I said, oh no, that's not me. Like, I'm not a scholar in that sense. Like, no. Like, and left it at that. Got finished with my 200 hour, and then like Emily was like, oh, I need more information, I need more study. Okay, what am I going to do? And came back 2 years later like, oh, this is the path that I'm supposed to be on. You are a scholar and you actually really do like this Sanskrit. You're going to take 3 whole semesters? Okay, girl. Like, it was definitely mind-boggling to me because I never thought that of myself. But once I got into it, once I got into the meditation of writing the Sanskrit, it really resonated with me in that way. And so I think for a lot of people, sometimes the scholarship, being in that conversation, it kind of surprises you how much you actually do understand. And then you want to go deeper. But Joe, I would love to hear more of your perspective of that.
Yeah, thanks. And you and Emily have already said so much good stuff. But yeah, so from my perspective, when I spoke with Professor Chappell coming in, he shared with me his experience that when he was doing his PhD, he was actually living at the ashram where he was practicing and studying under his guru. And he was saying that to me because he knew I had been at the ashram, I had been at the center, and was basically saying, you can be a real practitioner and actually deepen your practice by getting this more thorough scholarly understanding of the tradition as a whole and honing your understanding of the philosophy and so forth, and also the language. Because as soon as you go into, as you probably know, a lot of the translations, they never can quite get the full meaning across, or at least it's a shifted meaning. And so being able to go into these words and really understand them on their own terms is itself a deepening of the practice. And the whole exploration of language is also a part of the practice. So it's all very integrated. And for myself, I was going to say, Emily might not know this, but my thesis, even though I was very much coming from a practitioner perspective, it was it was modern, against the stream, modern Buddhism and global power systems. So
So like was able to explore those more scholarly sides, but then also, like Emily also said, we're going to Benedict Canyon and we're doing these retreats. And then really also it's how you approach it. And one of the things that I did was I was looking at what's most important in my own practice right now. And now I want to use this program to study that. So it's completely aligned.
Thank you. It's great. And Iana, I do have some time set up with you next week to have a one-on-one so I can get deeper into some questions there. But is just out of curiosity, the 200-hour teacher training is part of the entire master's program, or no, that's
No,
separate.
that was separate.
Yeah,
That was separate. We have, and Dr. Chappell, when he comes on, he'll probably give the full breadth of kind of the history of, like Susan said before, she was introduced to the program through continuing education. And so Dr. Chappell started in his home with a Sanskrit study group that expanded into certificates around Sanskrit and yoga philosophy. For a number of years, we had a 200-hour teacher training program that was a part of, again, the continuing education. And that's really how people kind of sometimes found us, right? Like they're interacting with these certificates, they're interacting with these 200-hour teacher trainings and realizing, oh, this is deeper than what I thought. I want to know more. I want to go further with this study. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Okay, who's next? An introduction, a question, both. Is it Daoud? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, it's Doda. I don't know if I have any questions right now. I I signed up for this, I guess, informational because I've done I guess I've practiced yoga since I was like 9 years old, and not on my own accord, just because my parents um kind of had me around, and it was through the Integral Yoga Health Institute in New York. And so what started out as like learning, breathing and meditation and movement, um, at some point in time turned into learning philosophy uh and so the thing is I have a full-time career, two full-time careers. um running a startup in the technology space and working with artists in music and entertainment. And I've just thought that maybe, I've had these kind of moments where I said, I wonder if like some of the stuff that I like learn and practice on my own could be applicable to, my career, and how I work with other humans. Um, and And yeah, so I think the curiosity has been like, should I get some kind of degree? I went to college, I have a degree in uh my field of work, but like and I've looked at like I guess like these teacher training certifications, and I've been like, should I do any of this? And what would be the benefit? So, it's definitely there's something to me that's curious about like getting some form of like formal education, but I've always been someone who's done a lot of self-study. Like that's how I graduated high school early because they had a self-study program. So it's like I've enjoyed doing those things, but at the same time I've got this thing in the back of my mind that's like, maybe you should go to school. And so that's, you know, I think I got an ad on Instagram a few years ago, and that's how I know about the program. Um, so that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm just, um, exploring. I've read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, or I've started to read like the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. But like, yeah. So that's where I'm at. Curious.
Awesome. That's a great place to be. Awesome, awesome place to be. What Susan Chapman didn't share, she started off in the entertainment industry before coming into this space. Like her, I started in entertainment, both on the film and television side and the music side. And having been in the program, I definitely see ways in which the two can blend together. So yes, I think you're in the right place. Definitely asking the right questions, and curiosity is that piece that really helps support a person's growth through this program. You need to be curious and want to pull on that thread, and keep pulling and pulling until, you know, until you get to the end of the program, but also recognize, like Susan said again, you're not going to stop learning. That thread is going to it's going to stay there. So thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself. We're glad you're here.
Yeah,
Leslie.
I
Oh, Emily,
oh
yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add really quickly. I when I started the program, like the first, yeah, almost 2 years, I was working multiple jobs, so like more than full time, and now I'm working full time, and it is doable. Um, I kind of dropped to only taking one course at a time, but honestly, it's been really helpful to slow down and like fully digest like the one topic. So I like there isn't a timeline or like a right way. Um, so just if you're curious about it and if you're thinking about it, but you know, aren't don't want to give up other parts of your work or career, there's flexibility. Just know that. People change their course loads all the time, decide to go faster, decide to go slower. Um, so just know that that's an option.
Yeah, I think thank you for saying that. I think that like what I'm wrestling with is like because we live in a like I live in LA, right? And I don't have no I- I'm not moving anytime soon. And so when I think about like, okay, like when I start to think about the there's one part of it that's about like the curiosity of learning, which I'm very interested in. Then my mind does this thing where it goes, but once you get this knowledge and information, you need to use it, which is maybe I don't actually need to do that, but like that's just what I'm telling myself. I need to use this, right? And so then I started thinking, well, I guess that's why I got to get some certification because I've learned all of this information for, almost 30 years. I've been, uh, and but like, well, I need this degree. And so then I start wrestling with like this, like, well, how long does it take? You know, am I going to spend 3, 4, 5 years doing this? And then what's the outcome? Um, and I don't know if that gets answered in these calls, but I guess like you just brought up, like you can take one course at a time, and that is doable. It's not, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we will definitely not answer that question for you. But I will say this, people come to our program um for different reasons, and there are a number of people who come who are lifelong learners, and they don't necessarily see any career path for themselves with this. They do just want to learn. And so there are some people who kind of step into that space. um, there's also, what I mentioned before about the services that LMU has. One of them is our Office of Career and Professional Development. And for you who has a career, that might not mean much to you in this moment. But if you're thinking, gosh, I want to sit with somebody and really talk to them about, how do I integrate this? How do I move forward with this piece of yoga studies? There are people who are there to really kind of counsel you in that way. Um, I think there are also a couple of classes that help people kind of think thoughtfully about that. Again, the class, the yoga, mindfulness, and social change class that Dr. Carlisle teaches is one area where you're really able to explore that and how you might bring yoga into the world. The other class is on the yoga therapy track, and Dr. Fazio will talk more about that when she comes on. But in this health science 2 class, we challenge students to take a particular population of people that they want to serve, and think critically about the philosophy and this salutogenic approach to yoga, and all the different sides of yoga therapy, and how are they going to serve that population in their community. And so there are ways for you to kind of start thinking about that. It doesn't have to be something that you decide in this moment. It might be something that reveals itself along the journey. But yeah, thank you for that perspective. Leslie, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you located, and what inspired you to come today?
Hi guys. First of all, I apologize for any background noise. I'm not home. Um, I am from a suburb outside of Chicago, Illinois. Um, Kind of bummed that the other young woman hopped off because I'm curious about her experience with the online version. There's part of me that's really sad and feels like I'm gonna miss so much by not being in person. Um, What brought me to LMU? I honestly Google yoga study has been part of my life for like 30 years. And I am one of those people who you were just talking about, just curious. I put a lot of pressure on myself to figure out as someone who's been a stay-at-home mom for about 20 years. What I want to do with my life and how I want to give back. And yoga is the only thing that I am passionate about, and that has been a consistent through line in my life as I've grown up. And I am curious, wildly curious. I am a lifelong learner. And through Google and trying to figure out where I can learn what I haven't learned already all in one place. LMU, it was pretty much LMU or Naropa, and your program offers everything that I am looking for. So super pumped and hope I get accepted.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Even though Alethea popped off, I can speak to that virtual space as well, only because yes, I'm located in LA, but I started during the pandemic, and
Mm,
everything was virtual at that point. So some of the experiences that Joe and his cohorts had, um, being in class together and just having few people maybe virtually, all of our cohort was virtual. And we didn't get our first foundations course where you come together for that 2-week intensive. We didn't even
mhm,
have that, right? Because we were
mm,
on lockdown. Most of my classmates graduated still in that virtual space. It was only because I stayed in the program longer to finish that I actually got to do more in-person items. Our program started kind of making the move to be virtual before the pandemic. So it was a seamless transition. They were already recording and cataloging all of the classes. So it made it very easy when the pandemic hit to just be able to pivot to that space and still hold everyone in community.
mm,
So it was still in those virtual rooms, the distancing um, once a month to do the Benedict Canyon retreats, that people were able to come together.
mhm,
Now I will say this for current back to, I guess our normal kind of everyday life. Cohorts come together for 2 weeks over the summer, or rather right before the official fall school year starts, so in August.
Mhm.
You have during those intensive 2 weeks, you are bonding, like Joe said, with your cohort. You're in class all day from 9 a.m. to about 3 p.m. You're in study groups with your cohorts, doing the readings, in class discussion, class projects. And then also over those weekends, going on excursions within Los Angeles.
Okay.
So the Shivananda Center, going up to Ojai, and some of those places that are important to yoga.
Mhm.
So you're bonding with your cohort. And so that way, when you're then become virtual,
You're still connected.
you're still connected.
Yeah.
The trip to India is no longer mandatory, but we do still offer a trip to India. And so if
Mhm.
that's something that you're interested in, that's another opportunity for you to be in person and see your cohort in that way.
Got it. Okay.
And I know all the, like, my cohort has been hybrid. Like, I'm actually one of the only people who ever comes in person. There's like me and one other person. So it's us, and then everyone else is like on the screen. And yeah, it hasn't felt weird or anything. Like, we all have a group chat. I know a lot of the other cohorts have group chats, or people will make group chats for specific classes. So there's definitely ways of finding connection, and like, I think everyone wants the community as a component of this, and so
Yeah,
works to be inclusive for sure.
it's good to know.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say is LMU is also recognizing this new normal of virtual education as well. So their GS LMU, which is their, graduate president, vice president, and such, who kind of keeps all the graduate programs at LMU, or services all of them. So the School of Business, the School of Education, Communications, SFTV, they bring together all the graduate students on campus. They're realizing, oh, we have more virtual students that we need to support. So that's also the piece.
Okay.
And as a tip, just so you know, the GSLMU always has like funding available, and they're often giving out like mini grants for like travel for conferences and stuff. So I'm sure you could be like, hey, there's this class thing in LA, give me some money. They probably would.
Awesome.
Yes, they're always sending out notifications about that as well. Yes. I want to be mindful of our time. It is 5 o'clock, and I promised my alum and current students I would only hold them until 5. So Joe, Emily, thank you so much for joining us and giving your perspective. I really appreciate it. We have 2 of our faculty who have joined us, Dr. Lori Fazio, Dr. Zoe Sladoff. And so I am going to turn the floor and kind of shift a little bit over to our faculty so we can talk about the nitty-gritty of the program.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Wonderful. Hi. So we don't have Dr. Chappell just yet. I know he's still traveling, and that's fine. Um, we've had a little bit of conversation with our alum and Emily, who is, just finishing up. And so they've gotten a glimpse of their perspectives. And so now we turn to you, our faculty, to talk about each of your classes. And so Dr. Lori Fazio is really focused on yoga and health. And so that yoga therapy track, she will be the one to really focus on that. Dr. Sladoff is our Sanskritist, and she can talk about the philosophy and just all things Sanskrit. So I don't know who wants to go first, but I will leave it to the 2 of you.
I'm happy to go if hi everybody. maybe I'll just tell you a little bit about myself and then about the program. So I'm from New York. I've now been in LA for 3+ years, much to my great surprise. And I started doing yoga when I was 15 from a videotape of Rodney Yee on the beach. And I moved to the East Village when I was 17, actually to study engineering at Cooper Union, but started taking lots and lots of yoga classes and then teaching yoga at 18, which I don't think really happens anymore. But back then, there weren't that many teachers. So I just kind of started teaching and got into Ashtanga practice and met the person who became my teacher, Patabi Joyce, when he was visiting New York. And at the end of a month of practice with him, he said, "Come to Mysore." And I said, "Okay." And I went to Mysore for 4 or 5 months. And he was a Sanskritist and he would quote texts, and I was just so impressed and so curious and really just wanted to know what he was saying, and all of these things that just felt like these secrets beyond the actual physical practice. So I started studying Sanskrit my first trip to India. I kind of went back and forth a lot, and eventually went back to school at Columbia, where I finished my undergrad and then started a PhD program. Um, and I thought I was going to study cognitive science, but I took a couple Sanskrit classes and I was just like, this is what I need to do with the rest of my life. And I kept teaching yoga. And so I ended up in a PhD program. I ended up quitting after the master's in South Asian studies, and I opened a yoga studio in New York, which I had for 12 and a half years. During that time, I wrote the Sanskrit textbook, which I teach from in this program, Yogavataranam, the translation of yoga. Actually, I think just got a publisher for my second edition, so I'm excited about that. And Anyway, during that time, I ended up going back to school, actually, because of Dr. Chappell, who I will speak of him since he's not here. He wrote me a lovely book review for my Sanskrit textbook and came to visit me in New York, which was when we first met. And so then I was working on this translation afterwards, and my publisher said to send it to him. And he said, "You should do a PhD dissertation at Lancaster with Chakravarti Ramprasad." And it's like, okay. So I ended up doing that. And, if you are called to study yoga and philosophy, Sanskrit, yoga therapy, all of it, it tends to tell you what to do more than you tell it what to do. And so I ended up finishing my PhD. And then ended up teaching one Sanskrit class from New York during COVID, never thinking I would move out here. But somehow here I am full time now for a few years, and driving, which I learned to do in my 40s, which is maybe the hardest thing I've ever done, and has given me a lot of empathy for people coming back to school and learning new things as a grown-up. It's it's quite something. So the main thing I teach is Sanskrit. I teach a first-year Sanskrit class. So that's the fall and the spring semester, as well as a third semester the following fall, which people in the yoga philosophy track take. And I really start from the beginning, and I'm here to hold your hand. I know sometimes people get scared about learning Sanskrit, but it's a journey, and we take it together. And I actually start teaching the Sanskrit class in the foundations course in August, and I'm teaching that this summer, which I'm really excited about. So if you join the program, I will get to meet you in person there. I don't know if you talked about the foundations at all. Okay, so the 2-week intensive at the beginning of the program where you come and we kind of build a foundation for everything that you're going to do and kind of plant seeds and build a roadmap. And so it's 2 weeks being here in person, also getting to know your cohort, and kind of all day, every day. And yeah, so that you get immersed, so that when you go back to your lives, you already have it in you. I've also taught the, let's see, the yoga philosophy course, which I think Dr. Chappell will be teaching next year, but it's also, you kind of get to go into all of the texts, starting with the Vedas and the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita and the Yoga Sutra and the Sankhya Karika and the Yoga Vasishta, and there's so many yoga texts. But it's a wonderful immersion in all of these texts. And again, it's something that one of the things students always say is how the classes kind of bounce off of each other. And so we'll be reading verses in Sanskrit class that you'll be talking about in yoga philosophy and, kind of back and forth. Also in yoga therapy, a lot of these come up again. And, in the Hatha text course, which Dr. Fazio can talk more about, but we co-taught that last year, and I think she'll be teaching it this year. But that's a whole, there's so many Hatha yoga texts that it's its own course. And I also, this semester and for the last 3 years, have been teaching the thesis class. So I'm sort of, this year doing the beginning and the end, the foundations and the final project. And it's kind of wonderful to see all those seeds that people planted at the beginning blossom into these beautiful projects. I actually just compiled a list of everybody's thesis titles for our final colloquium, and we just have such exciting, interesting, different projects, both from yoga therapy and yoga philosophy angles. So yeah, it's a really exciting, fun place to be, and we hope you will join us. And I'm here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Fazio, please.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you here. I didn't, since we didn't hear where you are all from, I'm curious where everybody is, because I heard a little conversation about virtual before we came in. So I don't know if you want to pop in the chat or something. I'm just real curious to know a little bit about you all. So as I share about me, I'd love to know a little bit about you. My journey, let's see. So yes, I teach Kate is local in LA, got it. And, another, Dakota is in LA and suburban Chicago, got it. Awesome. So yeah, Zoe's from New York. I'm from Central New York originally, not too far from where Dr. Chappell is from. We have this Central New York vibe. So many people who have ended out here. Out here, I'm no longer there, but in that area. So a little bit, I grew up in upstate New York, Central New York, and then I took a physical therapy pathway. That was my background as far as an academic journey. So I did 3 different degrees in physical therapy, my bachelor's, my master's, and my doctorate. It's a pretty monotonous kind of journey that way. And I've been practicing as a physical therapist for, oh my gosh, too long to say, probably more than most of you have been alive. And I, alongside that, I started practicing yoga back in the early 90s. And my introduction to yoga was more about a spiritual journey. And then the two came together. And I've been teaching here in the yoga therapy program. We had a certificate program before. So I started with that in 2008. And then into the master's in 2014. So I've been in the master's teaching since 2014. And the classes that I teach, I have the Health Science and Yoga 1 that everybody takes in the fall. And in that class, we look at the various models of the yogic body, the subtle body, the doshas, the vayus, the panchamaya, the gunas, all different realms of the subtle body. And then we also look at the understanding of the body through the various systems, the cardiovascular, the pulmonary, the digestive, and how yoga has potential effects on these various systems. So really look at understanding the health science of yoga. And then the Hatha class is in the spring, and in that class, we study, just as Zoe said, or Dr. Sletov said, some of the hatha texts because there's so many. So we take about, I think we're now up to about 10 of them. And we, just to get a flavor how each one has its unique flavor, its unique focus, to get a broader sense of about hatha yoga. And it's also very much experiential. I'm a huge believer that to study yoga, you also need to experience yoga. So I'm come from very much the practitioner scholar realm. So all of my classes that I teach have an embodied component to it. And in the hatha class, you will do a tapas project the entire semester to kind of understand the concept of how yoga through tapas you can gain inner strength. And then those who are interested in further study of health science and yoga, you can opt to take the yoga therapy track within the masters, or some people choose to do all of the masters and then add these courses on and obtain what's called a postgraduate certificate in yoga therapy. Or as I said, you can embed it within. And to do that, there's 3 courses. So one is Health Science and Yoga 2. That is my favorite class, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. Another is Yoga Therapy Applications. And that's where you learn the skills to shift from a yoga teacher to a yoga therapist. So the one-on-one types of skills. So how to do a breath assessment. I feel that I'm not actually a fan of the term yoga therapy, because therapy infers something's broken and you have to fix it. And the premise of what we do is that you're not broken. It's just things essentially, some scars, habits you've gained, or ways of life that have led to dis-ease or dukkha. And so how can we strive more towards sukha? And in modern medicine, we call that salutogenesis. So pathogenesis is the study of disease, what causes disease, and salutogenesis is a study of what causes health and well-being, and how can yoga support people towards greater health and well-being. And so we do a breath assessment, an extensive breath assessment, because the breath is that bridge between the body and the mind. And we learn skills like motivational interviewing and just all kinds of skills about working with individuals. And then at the end, there's a practicum course. And some people opt to implement the Health Science 2 projects that I'll talk about. Others focus on working one-on-one with clients, and it's all mentored, and it's where you really put everything into play. And that's the practicum class. So back to the Health Science 2 class. This class it was created to help people really be supported in their own unique journey and how they want to take yoga out into the world afterwards. And so everybody creates an evidence-based yoga program for a population that they want to work with. So a lot of people choose various marginalized populations. Others have very specific interests. Some of the ones from last year. So last year, we had somebody who works with Chinese-speaking immigrants who live in Chinese enclaves and don't use modern medicine for various reasons, and therefore they have a lot of health issues. So she thought, well, if I can bring yoga to them, A, it will help their health, B, also educate them on how and why they might want to also use modern medicine when there's a time and a place for that. Another one that's been very successful is for survivors of domestic violence. So she was teaching a yoga class in a nonprofit for that, and thought there was so much more potential for yoga therapy, the one-on-one, or more of the yoga therapeutics in a group. So she pitched this program that she created, and they let her do it. We did a little pilot study. And now they've asked her to implement it, a teacher training, to put it all over the country and eventually around the world, because the study showed it was more effective than their support group. Probably why? Because when you have trauma, it's embodied in your body, and you do need to work with the body as well as the mind. And there's a whole list of different projects that whatever population somebody wants to work with, be it children. Somebody else did a project for menopause that in her country got implemented into the healthcare system. So she gets paid well, and it's subsidized so that all the women can come together, and it's also educational. So all kinds of projects. So what do? The the underlying current of that course is to understand the effects that various practices have on our being. So whereas many yoga therapy programs look at what's the disease and what do we do for it, I don't like to focus in that way because that makes people identify with their disease. And instead, we look at we're working with a human being who's experiencing a disease or a condition or whatever it is. So it's really more focused on the individual. And so we look at the various categories of practices in yoga, various types of asana, pranayama, mantra, mudra, even dinacharya from Ayurveda, and what types of effects might that have. So one of the examples that I think kind of demonstrates that clearly is mantra. Most people think of mantra for its classical traditional purpose and intention, which is by evoking a quality of a deity or evoking the vibration of a Sanskrit term, some different intentions with mantra, not necessarily for health. However, when you recognize that when you chant a mantra aloud, you're extending your exhalation, you're utilizing all of your what we call social engagement systems. So according to something called the polyvagal theory, it's really good for trauma. It helps modulate the nervous system. So we look at these things so that you can take the medical science, the psychological science, as well as the classic yoga. What do the texts say about these practices, and create this program, bridging both sciences. We give both sciences equal weight. And you write it in such a way that you could pitch it to a nonprofit, a school, wherever it is. And then you create a presentation for the class, and we are pretending to be whoever you'd be pitching it to. So you get to practice, and then take that out into the world. And so that's been a really successful way to launch the work that you want to do. And then in the practicum class, you create a poster that you can take to a conference, and that could be on your small project that you did a pilot project, or you did one-on-one with somebody and you did a case study. And then we have the India trip. So the India trip is actually happening this December. It's open to the public. Anybody can come. So if you wanted to get a flavor, you could come, even if before you're enrolled. And we spend 2 weeks. We spend a week in southern India, the southeast in Pondicherry, where we study at the Mahatma Gandhi Medical Center and the Institute for Salutogenesis and Complementary Medicine with Dr. Ananda Bhavanani, and they have yoga therapy in the hospital there. So we see how they're using it there. We study at the ashram. We go to Oroville, which is an experimental community it's really kind of an interesting experience to visit. And then we fly across the country to Kaivalya Dham and stay at the very first yoga therapy research center in the world. And we study there for a week. It's an ashram. We live on the ashram. It's a very comfortable ashram with amazing organic garden with organic sattvic food. And we learn about Ayurveda. They have a very large Sanskrit library of the ancient texts, and we get to see the real ancient texts, meet with their philosophy professors as well, and have private classes with their teachers and all kinds of things like that. If you're interested, I'm going to pop my email in there, send me that you're interested, or anything that you have questions about health science and yoga, and I'm happy to answer them.
I'll give you mine also.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for sharing that. I want to take a moment to kind of give students or applicants a understanding of how the program is kind of structured. And so, like Dr. Zoe Sadoff said, you start with this foundations class, and I apologize. I'm in an area where there is music playing in the background, so if I'm being interrupted, I apologize. I needed to plug in my computer. So just give me a thumbs up to make sure you can hear me. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Cool. So you start with that 2-week foundations course. It happens in August, usually kind of top of August to mid-August. This gives you a whole extra week to kind of get home and get settled before the actual semester starts. School this coming fall, the school year starts on Monday, August 25th. And with that, you would then start with the first two classes that you have, which is Sanskrit 1 and then health science and yoga 1. Depending upon what track you're on, if you're on a low residential track, meaning you are outside of Los Angeles, you know you're going to attend each class virtually. You may be working full-time or part-time, and so you're going to take the program at a slower pace. You're going to take about 2 classes per semester to stay on track in order to graduate in 3 years. And so the next semester that you have in that spring, you would take yoga, philosophy, text, and practice, and then Sanskrit 2. Over the summer, we have 2 classes, one in summer session 1, one in summer session 2, Buddhism and yoga, and then Jainism and yoga. For those, again, who are on that low residential track, you have the option of taking one class over your first summer, or you can take both classes. It depends on how much time you have and what you feel like your bandwidth is. And that you can make that decision when you get to that point. For students who are on the full track, the full-time track, the residential track, they are going to finish the program in 2 years. And so that second semester that you have, you're going to take 3 classes, in addition to yoga, philosophy, text, and practice, and Sanskrit 2. You're going to take Hatha Yoga text. Again, summer comes up. And because you're going to complete the program in 2 years, you would take both of those summer session 1 classes that one summer that you have in between your first and second year. When you come back around to the fall, again, for those who are on the low residential track, you're only taking 2 classes. For those who are thinking, I'm going to focus on philosophy, you will take either comparative mysticism or yoga, modern yoga, mindfulness, and social change, and then your third semester of Sanskrit. So that one elective, you'll choose between which one is being offered, and then you'll take your third semester of Sanskrit. By the time you get to your final spring semester, you're taking your writing and research seminar. You're doing your oh, excuse me. If you're on the low residential track, I'm sorry, you're going to take your Hatha Yoga text class that spring semester, right? Because you have a whole nother year. When you come back again over the summer, you've decided, am I taking the one class that I didn't take? And then in the fall, you're taking that one elective that you didn't take. For residential students, you're taking 3 classes in your fall semester, your second semester. Either both of those elective courses, yoga, philosophy, the comparative mysticism, and then modern yoga, mindfulness, social change, and your Sanskrit 3 course. Your final semester, that spring semester, you're taking your writing and research, your thesis, which feels like, oh, wow, it came up so fast. Which is why a lot of students do take the low residential track, because they do want more time to embody and integrate that material into their study and into their life. For those who are on the yoga philosophy, the yoga therapy track, where things look a little bit different is in your second year. So as opposed to taking a third year of Sanskrit, if you're on the yoga therapy concentration, you're going to sub out that third year of yoga Sanskrit, and you're only going to take one elective. So you'll choose between comparative mysticism or modern yoga, mindfulness, social change, for when you're going to finish, for what you're thinking you're going to finish with your program. And the classes that you're going to sub in, health science 2 that Dr. Fazio spoke about, the yoga therapy applications, and then in your final semester it's going to be the practicum delivery course. The timing of all that, it really depends on, again, are you low residential? Are you residential? And what makes the most sense for you? Lots of students they take that yoga therapy track maybe in their second year, whether they're on the residential or the low residential track. And sometimes they take it in their third year. It really depends on, what your focus is and what you're feeling like you want to do post graduation. And you'll have those conversations with Dr. Fazio along your pathway, so you make the right decision for yourself. I know that was a little confusing. I got a couple of things here and there intertwined, but all of this information is on our website. And so you have it written down for you. There's a link to the low residential track, so you can see what that looks like written out. There's also a link to the residential track, so you can see what those 2 years look like.
Great. Are you able to drop those links in the chat here?
Sure, I can drop those links.
Thank you.
Before I move on though, are there any other questions? And maybe while the question is being asked, and then maybe Dr. Sladoff or Dr. Fazio answering those, I can go and grab the links for you.
I do have a question, and Dr. Fazio, I can email you about this as well, but I am interested in the therapy track. And it's so interesting that you have that background in physical therapy. I've considered a physical therapy degree in the past. I'm currently injured with an ankle injury, so this is all very real at the moment for me going through physical therapy myself. But I'm curious if, and again, if this is a longer answer, we can take it offline over email. But for somebody who wants to ultimately be a practitioner and take what they learn from the program and be out in the world practicing, do you find, like, is there therapists and mental health therapists have to take certain classes, they're required to have certain hours and to get a certification? What does that look like for a yoga therapist to actually practice in the world?
It's a really great question. So I'm actually glad that you brought that up because I didn't go into that. So all the other professions, those are like mental health, it's licensed, physical therapy is licensed. As of now, yoga therapy is not a licensed profession. There's an organization in the United States called the International Association for Yoga Therapists, IAYT. And they have kind of self-governed yoga therapy. And they decided not to go the route of licensing, but to instead certify people through their own exam. So they have a certification exam. So you have to graduate from an accredited program. And if you graduate from an accredited program, you can sit for their exam at that point. And they have competencies that are in place for that. Now, internationally, even though that's the International Association of Yoga Therapists, many countries have established their own. There's one in Japan, there's one in Korea, there's one in Australia. So it's a little bit relatively new territory, even though the founder of IAYT, co-founder, was Larry Payne from our program, who I started teaching with in 2008. It's changed a lot since then. So you don't need to have certification to call yourself a yoga therapist. Some within healthcare, IAYT is trying to get coding so that people can bill for yoga therapy, but they're not going for licensing. We are an accredited program. We were actually the very first accredited program. However, we've decided not to re-accredit. Our accreditation is going to conclude in August of 2026. And I'm happy to chat about the reasons why we've made that decision. We do still offer a pathway for that, however, because we know that some people want that certification as well. And so as it is right now, our students who are going for that, in addition to the yoga therapy curriculum, they also take 2 electives. So everybody takes an elective or certificate in the MA. Everybody chooses one. It's through our extension program. There's yoga philosophy, there's yoga ed, I think there was, I don't know if that's still there. And then the yoga therapy, there's yoga therapy for musculoskeletal ailments, yoga therapy for mental health and special populations. Those are each one of the approximately 100-hour certificate programs. And then there's also a yoga for children. Approximately, they're all about 100-hour certificates. So you need to take for IAYT the musculoskeletal and the mental health in special populations. Both of those, each of them are about 6 months on a weekend, and it's with our partner Alchemy Yoga Therapy in Orange County. It's graduates of our program who run that program, and they've been around for a while. And then you also need an additional 125 hours of practicum. You need a total of 150 hours of practicum. You get about 25 in the program, and then you would do the rest afterwards, which some people would decide to do anyway, just to do more mentored practicum hours. So that's kind of as far as getting out in the world. Now, what we did, when we started, we were the very first accredited program. Now there's over 70 schools. Although there are several that have closed since then, the Health Science 2 project, the reason they kind of went that route, and even having a program within a master's, is that a lot of places require an academic degree, not just a certificate from a yoga studio. So like to teach in academia, a lot of our graduates have gone on to teach yoga in university courses. You need a degree to do that for most things. But for the Health Science 2, I really wanted people to have that kind of support the individual students in their own journey, which is different from a yoga therapy program where you're all learning the skill set and then going out and kind of being the entrepreneur and launch it, which some people still do. So what we found was that Health Science 2 program was getting more people out there doing really what they wanted to do, but that doesn't fit into the IAYT model as much, because IAYT is looking at, did you learn these skills? Did you learn these competencies? Not, did you learn how to create a program that you can take out there? Do you have the skill set to do that? So a little bit different emphasis. I don't know if that makes sense. I recommend, when there's two things, one is to look at the IAYT competencies, and I can share that. There's also the Indian Yoga Association, which just came out last week or the week before with their educational standards, which are quite a bit different. And they actually require that you have 50 case studies before you can be certified as a yoga therapist. So it's quite a bit more. And to do that, you need to be mentored or trained by someone who they've deemed a yoga chikitsa acharya. And they have granted me that, what do you call it? That title, that honor, or whatever that is. So the students that I work with all have that kind of opportunity because of that. I'm one of their acharyas. So that's brand new. We don't have it in formalized, yes, everybody can go that pathway yet, but that's a direction that we're looking at, because it really works well with our program. But it sounds like, Kate, we should have a chat and we can go through more details.
I'd love that. Thank you.
No, I'll pop some stuff in.
Sure. Dr. Fate, I would love for you to even kind of expound upon salutogenesis and like the whole person approach. Alethea touched on that a little bit before, but maybe you can expound on that.
I missed Alethea. She was here. Oh, bummer. Yeah. So as I said before, so pathogenesis is what's the study of what causes disease. So many of the yoga therapy models will look at, okay, you have MS, what are you supposed to do for MS? You have back pain, what do you do for this? The reason why I do not advocate for that model is that I started the very first yoga therapy internship in a medical clinic that was at the Venice Family Clinic in LA. And we did that, it was many years ago. We had to close it during COVID. But I had the students who had done all their education, and they come into clinic and they get the patients. The majority of patients were experiencing homelessness, have multiple comorbidities, and the students were in a panic. They take the paper and say, oh my gosh, I know what to do for diabetes and I know what to do for hypertension, but I don't know what to do. This person has diabetes, hypertension, GERD, low back pain, and a knee replacement. what do I do? Because they had compartmentalized each thing. And I had to work so hard to help them to see, to look at a client in a holistic manner. This is a human being who's experienced all of these things. You're not treating any of those things. You're not a physical therapist. You're not a mental health therapist. You're a yoga therapist, and own the importance of it. And I feel very strongly, and I've given talks on this, that the acceleration of chronic disease in this country and globally, and chronic pain is skyrocketing. So our medicine's not effective for that. We already know that. And we need modalities that are different from the pathogenic model. And yoga therapy is so well situated. Spiritual health and understanding the breath, both of those things together, that's the wheelhouse of a yoga therapist that nobody else has a forte in. So really own that and see how what you do makes everybody else's medicine work better. And that also makes everybody else more willing to work with you, because what many yoga therapists say is, well, what you do doesn't work, but what we do works better. And I have my doctorate. If someone comes to me and tells me that, I'm not going to send a patient to them, because I don't trust that. You know, you had 800 hours of training. I've got 7 years of medical education. Don't tell me that what you know is so much better. Instead, educate me on what you can do to work together. So that it's a very different approach. So the salutogenic approach is, let's look at how yoga can support their health and well-being while they're experiencing hypertension and while they have all these things. And hopefully we do look at things like, yes, extended exhalation will help hypertension. Breath hold is contraindicated. We look at all of that. But we look at the root, which is the philosophy, which goes back to Dr. Slaytoff and all that, where it all ties together, is our samskaras and our vasanas and these deep-seated psychic layers of our, is what the root of all disease lies in the mind, according to yoga, and we help people to be able to access that. And that's where you get the transformation of the diabetes and the hypertension and the chronic pain and the GERD and all these things. And recognize if it's already at an organic stage, you're not going to change the organic part, but you'll make them feel so much better and let the medical practitioner deal with the organic part. Many people aren't there yet. They're in a place where they still can get complete healing. And that's really where we have so much. We can work with all of them. Some of them need much more medical care, others less. So I don't know if does that give a little, I could go off forever and I don't want to hijack everything.
No, thank you. That was perfect.
My soapbox.
Thank you so much. Are there any more questions? I want to be mindful of time. We have about 10, 15 minutes left. No questions. Okay, great. Then we'll keep moving forward. One thing that I do want to talk about before we close out today, it's the question of tuition, right? How do we pay for our education? In the chat, I'm putting a link to our main website, a link to my one-on-one appointment scheduler. I do have appointments coming up in April. And it's also a link to our tuition and where to find that information. The thing to remember about LMU is, in addition to coming into this graduate program, you're also getting the experience and the resources of LMU as a university system. So thinking about LMU's library, thinking about the research assistants that are available to you there, thinking about the Academic Resource Center and how they are there to support you as you're integrated back into academia, having been out of academia for some time, or having worked in an industry that might be different from what we're doing here in yoga studies. Also, too, for people who are thinking about career shifts, the Center for Career and Professional Development, right? So all of these resources you have to you, there are also a number of resources that students then get to take with them as they become alum of LMU. That being said, the tuition cost for this institution right now, currently in this present academic year, each unit is $1,543. If you are on the yoga philosophy track, you're going to complete 36 units within your class structure, in addition to your certificate, which doesn't really, the cost doesn't really equate in the same way as the master's program. So that's a little bit different. We keep that pricing separate. If you're on the yoga therapy concentration side, you're going to complete 39 units. And so when you're thinking about the total cost for education, you're going to multiply that $1,543 number times those units. That's what you'll end up paying over the course of the entire program. Again, if you're on the low residency track, you're taking about 2 classes per semester, which is going to be 6 units per semester. So that's what you're going to pay about each semester. If you're on the residential track, you're going to be taking about 9 credits per semester. And so again, you multiply that number times 9, that's what you'll be paying each semester. We have scholarships and grants that are available to students. So we encourage everyone to fill out the scholarship applications. For those who are local to Los Angeles, you also have the opportunity to work on LMU's campus. We have graduate assistantships within our program. We also have teacher assistantships. Lots of teachers across LMU need assistance through the RAIN program. So there are a number of opportunities for you to get funding for this program and really make it work for you in that way. Okay. I'll pause for questions.
When is the when is the application deadline?
Yeah. So our priority deadline is April 1st, meaning this is the deadline where we encourage students to have their application in, have their scholarship applications in. It allows us to see all of the students who are applying, so we know how much money we have to give out. We accept applications after that April 1st deadline. However, the monies that we have available aren't always guaranteed after that priority deadline.
Great. And then are there prerequisites or any particular undergraduate degree that's required for application?
So there's not a specific undergraduate degree that we're looking for as far as like a prerequisite, only that you've completed an undergraduate degree. And so for people, because this is recorded for individuals who might be thinking about the program who are international students, we would need your transcripts evaluated. But for the most part, we just want to make sure you did complete that undergraduate education. And so that's why we're looking for those transcripts. Our application process does not require the GRE, the GMAT, some of these other tests, because what you're doing in the program is not tested by those standardized tests. The important part of your application is going to be that writing sample and your letter of intent, right? This program is philosophy heavy, it's writing heavy, it's, understanding and applying these philosophical texts and tenets to study. And so we want to make sure students are ready for graduate level work. And so that writing sample and your letter of intent are going to be important in your application. When you look at the website, when we talk about the certificates, that could be considered a pro or co-requisite. It's not required that you complete the certificate before you get started. But if you're thinking, oh, I'm thinking about the program, I want to dip my toe in, then you can start with the certificates and then apply. But you can also complete those certificates while you're matriculating through the program.
Yeah, I was looking at under the continuing studies, there is the yoga journey, the 250-hour teacher training, which incorporates, of course, the teacher training, but also 50 hours of philosophical coursework. Is that something people sometimes do, like take that?
Yeah, so we have a relationship with Breathe Ojai, which is located in Ojai, California. Their teacher training is in person, but the owner of Breathe, is a graduate of our program and recognizes that the Yoga Alliance doesn't necessarily require a lot of philosophy with their teacher trainings, but lots of people want and need more. And so we created this 250-hour option to supplement more philosophy, inject more philosophy into the teacher training model, to really help support people as they go out into the world to teach. So that's an option. The journey to India is an option. As Dr. Fazio mentioned before, there's a 100-hour youth yoga module that we're doing this spring. And then the yoga philosophy track, the yoga philosophy certificate is always tried and true.
Great. And I do have some time set up with you again next week, Yana, and we could talk about this more, but I'm wondering if any of those certificates, if the classes end up counting toward credit of any of the graduate programs, if you end up doing them, or
They're separate. They are continuing education. It's an option for some students, number one, in our program, to get that concentration, to go a little bit deeper. Because of the way the hours are set up, you have more contact hours with the material, but it's not necessarily graduate level work. The graduate classes are graduate level work. And so they don't necessarily translate in that you take one over here to supplement or the other. With continuing education for people who aren't necessarily ready to do a master's program, it allows people to really interact with the material in a way that is more digestible and feasible to their scheduling.
Great. Great.
Any other questions?
I feel like I'm taking all the time.
No, it's okay. Ask away.
We love it. Ask away.
Okay,
That's why we have these info sessions for,
You're totally good.
questions.
Your questions are helpful.
okay.
Yes.
So yeah,
And
no worries.
that's usually the case too. People ask questions that might have been burning on someone else's mind, so it's okay. Again, in the chat, you have a link to my scheduler. So we have a meeting coming up, Kate, but if anybody else wants to schedule a time with me, I'm available. You have links to the website. You have email addresses for Dr. Sladoff and Dr. Fazio. If you're interested in connecting with Dr. Chappell, then I can put you in contact with him as well. So yeah, thank you all for joining us today. If there are no more questions, then I will close our session out. Don't forget, after this at 6 o'clock, there are a couple of other meetings, the financial aid info session, as well as the info session with the Center for the Career and Professional Development Office and the Office for International Students.
Thank you. This has been so helpful.
You're
Yes,
very
thank you so
welcome.
much.
You're welcome.
Take care, everyone.
Nice to meet everybody.
Bye.